Hi, I'm Kelly Humphreys in Mission Control Houston, and I've got a special guest, Christy Sauer, here with me. Welcome to all you students in Austin. And so
So
we're
go
ready for
ahead
your
with your first
questions
question.
whenever you want to go.
Okay. My name is Truth Lee, and I want to ask a question. Do astronauts have trouble walking when they return to Earth, and what do they do about it?
Good morning. Great question. Yes, it can be challenging for the astronauts once they get back to Earth, feeling gravity again after being away for so long. But they do so much exercise while they're up there to keep their muscles and bones strong that it really does help to reduce that effect. And they do bounce back pretty quickly. But you'll even see in some of the photos as the crew get back, folks standing on either side of them, helping them to walk when they first get back, and to make sure that they don't stumble at all. But good question. What future leader has another question for us this morning?
Do astronauts ever have to have mixed emotions and feeling of worry when they are on the ISS?
All right, and if you didn't quite hear that one, she was asking, do
Sure.
astronauts
Let's
ever?
talk a little bit
Oh, go
about,
ahead.
yeah, do crew members ever struggle psychologically while being up there? So, let me tell you that the crew members have very packed schedules while they're up there. There's a lot of maintenance, a lot of experiments and science and technology that needs to be done while they're up there. So, first of all, that's going to keep them very busy to keep their minds off of being away from home and things like that. But at the same time, NASA very much acknowledges the challenges of being away from family, being in a remote location. And so there are a lot of things also in place to make that experience easier. For example, being able to communicate with family via email and calls. Also, having some time for entertainment. They get to exercise, have to exercise regularly to keep their bodies fit. And that gives, again, a chance to rejuvenate. And those times where they get to look out the window and just look back at Earth and look at the stars, I know that is so cherished by the crew, and again helps them psychologically with those challenges of being up there. So for the most part, don't hear much about that, and honestly, a lot of crew members will keep that to themselves a little bit, even if they do feel something wanting to push through with their, they're very motivated people, very driven, and not going to let that stuff get in their way.
And just to add a little bit to that, they have, Christy mentioned the different communications methods. They actually have a internet telephone that they can call down to their friends and family on the earth to talk to them anytime they want to, really. They have email, they have the internet on board the space station, so they go look something up or order flowers for their kids when it's their graduation day or whatever. And we send them up movies and sometimes sporting events and videotape of their friends and family as they're doing different things on the earth to help them keep involved with what's going on back here at home. And so there's a lot of effort put into making sure that they don't get to that point. And they also have a periodic talk with their doctor on the ground so that their doctor can help them keep a lookout for any symptoms that they might not be understanding that would indicate that they were having that kind of a problem.
And for the Ann Richards School, a quick question. I was just wondering, do you guys have an external microphone? And if so, would you be able to move it even closer to the students? If you don't, then have the students get closer to the computer so we can definitely hear their next question.
Does the space food taste exactly the same as the regular food on Earth?
Okay, does space food taste the same as regular food on Earth?
Great question. So, one thing that's very interesting that happens in space is that your taste buds do not sense things the same as they do on Earth. And so, things that would have some spice or saltiness to it here often will taste very bland up there. So, it's a very common thing for the crew members to take their extra salt and Tabasco and things like that to liven things up. As in addition to that, the food on up in space needs to last longer than it would have to here on Earth, and so our food does go through a special space lab here at JSC where it is formulated especially for space. And so what we do leading up to a mission is there will be lots of creations of new foods and taste testing by the food lab and others, I've been blessed over the years to be able to try out some of the foods before they go up in space to help them get them, in just the right shape before they send them to a crew member. So you're right. It's a different experience with food up there, and uh, and I know that makes it all the better when they get back on Earth to enjoy their favorites back here again.
Yeah, one of the favorite items on board the space station is taco sauce, the little packets. They use those a lot because, as Christy says, the food can taste a little bit blander. It's the same flavor, but it just tastes a little blander. And another interesting tidbit is you might not think about it, but in microgravity, everything would tend to float around. And so that salt and pepper she's talking about are not the same kind of salt and pepper we use on our tables. They're actually salt and pepper that's mixed in oil or in water so that it doesn't fly off and get in your eye and cause a problem, because if anybody's had pepper in their eye, no, that's not a lot of fun. And so they use oil and suspended pepper and water suspended salt to season their food.
What would happen if an astronaut got really sick while living on the ISS?
Okay, what would happen if an astronaut got really sick while living on the space station?
Good question. So, first of all, we plan for those types of emergencies. There's all kinds of medications and medical supplies on board, and the astronauts are trained in the methods for helping sick astronauts. So, first of all, you would try to deal with it on board. But if truly it became to the point where you needed to get them back to Earth in a hurry, on the space station, we have that ability. We always will have a Soyuz spacecraft ready to bring the whole crew home, should that need to happen. So you're never stranded, and that's always an option. But we really haven't had to do that to date, thank goodness.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons, again, they have periodic talks with their doctor so that they can be open and let them know if they're having anything that the doctor might see as a symptom of a problem. And so we do try to make sure that happen. And there's all sorts of medical equipment, as Christy mentioned. There is, they can do blood tests on orbit. They have ultrasound, so they can actually look inside their bodies, like you might have done at your doctor's office, or like your mom may have had done when you were inside of her and they had an ultrasound picture that you might have seen of yourself when you were real little. So they can actually look inside. And one of the things they look at more than things that they've discovered recently is that the shape of your eye changes when you're in microgravity for a long period of time. And sometimes it doesn't change all the way back when you come back down to the ground, and they're actually working on developing a special ultrasound device that would allow them to do specific examinations of their eyes so they can try and understand that problem better. Because when people start going places on the Orion spacecraft that Chrissy's working on, they're going to be a lot farther away, and it's going to be a lot more important even to have really good vision through a long trip to Mars or an asteroid. And so we want to learn more about that particular effect that we're learning about.
Right, and that's an area actually my team is working on. The issues with the eyes, that feeds all the way back to the design of your spacecraft, the pressure of your spacecraft, whether you have a normoxic environment with the appropriate oxygen and pressure. And so these types of things are considered very early on in a spacecraft design and are very critical to the crew's health. I was also going to mention, when we were talking about all of the medical hardware they have on board, a number of years ago, I was able to help with the design and certification of hardware for both space station and the space shuttle. And, we try to use a lot of things that we have here on the ground that are common to you, but going through certification of those for spaceflight. And sometimes you have to have a slightly modified version of things, keeping in mind keeping the mass of things down, and also just the environment that you're working in space. So those are all types of things that our engineers here work on, is getting that equipment ready for space.
Yeah, one of the ones I think Christy worked on is the treadmill system that they have on board the space station right now. It's actually a commercially built treadmill that is used primarily by pro athletes here on the ground because it's kind of expensive, but it was modified for use on the space station.
Right.
What is the hardest or most difficult job you're working?
Hardest or most difficult job?
Let's see, hardest or most difficult job. I'd say, one of the challenging things around here is that we've got a lot of great work to do, and sometimes so much to do that you almost have to turn away things and and bring other people on board to do things. So I'll be honest, that can be one of the hardest things is saying no to folks when they want you to be a part of an effort that they're doing with some exciting work around here. Other than that, another thing more on a physical level that comes to mind, I did have the chance to go in the zero-G aircraft a couple years back where you fly the parabolas, and we were testing some hardware for Orion. We wanted to see for our seats there at our control station, how would we be able to get into those seats in zero gravity? And so I was able to fly on that flight and got to experience the challenges of going through those parabolas and the tendency to want to get sick and managed to hang in there for that flight. We got a lot of great test data out of that, but that was physically a challenging day. One last thing I'll mention, I had an opportunity to get in a Russian Orlan suit a while back, and I didn't appreciate until doing that the challenge of being in a suit that's pressurized. When they close that hatch and you're just in a closed system there within your suit, that took me a minute to start for my heart to stop racing as I got used to that environment. And although quickly you do get used to it, and that's what the astronauts go through a lot. There's a lot of tough stuff, but with training, you quickly become adapted and ready to do that in the challenging environment.
What Christy's talking about there is the spacesuits they wear when they go outside to do construction tasks on the outside of the space station. There's two different kinds of those. There's an American spacesuit that's called the Extravehicular Mobility Unit, and then there's the Russian version of that, which is called, as she said, the Orlan suit. So that's what she was talking about there. Now, there's a couple of other big issues that space station astronauts deal with, and one of them is cooperation. The space station is an international effort, and you have people from 15 different countries and cultures all working together, whether it's on the ground to support the astronauts in orbit, or they're on orbit working together using different languages, different cultures, and yet we make it all work. And so it can be hard to do that sometimes, to overcome a difference of the way you perceive something because of the way you grew up. But yesterday we had a briefing for one of the upcoming crews, and one of our Italian crew members had a great line. I thought they said, "We are the world champions in cooperation." And I think that's really true, because the space station is a multinational effort, and it takes people of all kinds to work together and make it happen and do all these great things they're doing for us here on the ground in Earth. And so I think that's a really neat aspect of space station.
While the next question is coming up, if I could add in for just a second. I know we've got a bunch of future leader ladies here joining us today, and I know that you guys are probably thinking about your next steps beyond high school, and just wanted to throw out some ideas real quick about what to be looking towards if you're interested in the STEM areas of science, technology, engineering, math. It is never too early to start looking for those opportunities to branch into STEM. I know NASA has a lot of opportunities starting as early as the junior high level, where you can find competitions online. Just recently, last week, Orion announced a new radiation student program that really starts all the way from kindergarten all the way through high school. So you're able to go through the NASA website and look for things like that to get those first opportunities to look at engineering and science. And so then, as you get more into the high school ages, obviously you're starting to look at what college to go to. And one of the biggest pieces of advice I can give there is to look for those opportunities in college for interning or co-oping with companies, whether it's with NASA or some other group. And even as you search for a college, you can find colleges that embrace that more and provide a strong co-op environment. And that's how I came to be here at NASA. I went to Georgia Tech for my undergraduate and University of Colorado for my graduate school, but at Georgia Tech, I didn't even know about co-oping coming into this, and they had a strong program, and was able to find out about the ties already there to NASA, and was blessed to get a job here, and that led me to where I am today. But it's not too early to be thinking about those things, because honestly, if I hadn't ended up in that co-op program, I wouldn't be sitting here today, because that is our main avenue for hiring people at NASA. So be proactive in looking for those opportunities to get ties to whatever your industry is that you're interested in early. Do those internships or shadowing different disciplines.
And I'll add that, I'm not a scientist or an engineer like Christy is, but I was an intern at NASA too. And so even if your interests don't lie in science and engineering, NASA needs people from all different walks of life to do the things that we do. We need people that know how to do budgets and billing and things like that. We need doctors. We need people who help with human resources for hiring and that kind of thing. So there's all kinds of different career options if you want to get involved in the space industry. And even if you're not a scientist or an engineer or that doesn't float your boat, there's other ways that you can get involved just if you're just interested.
My name is Rebecca, and I was wondering, or my friend was wondering, what kind of training did you need for your job?
What kind of
Did
training
you
do
hear
you
that
need
one?
for your job?
Great question. So, really NASA will help train you along the way to get to where you need to be for your job assignment. So that's a great thing. But the types of training that I have found that I need, very much leadership skills to be able to lead my projects, being able to interact well with others. I mean, everything we do is done through teams. Very seldom are you on your own tackling a task. So that's a huge part of what we do and what we train for also. Training also is very helpful in the areas of like computer-aided design to be able to bring your ideas into a CAD environment, start to create those and be able to build those. One of my main tasks right now is developing the mock-ups that we work on for Orion, and we use these to flesh out the design, eventually to certify the design, and eventually train the crew. And we are constantly designing hardware to put into those mock-ups. Same thing, if for those working on the flight vehicle, and so things like CAD and you know all those other things like PowerPoint and things like that that you guys probably already know well that help you communicate your design ideas.
There's other things we get training in too, some things that you wouldn't necessarily think of in NASA, but one of the things we've added on to our training recently is inclusion and innovation. And that's the whole idea of not excluding somebody because of their race or their religion or any of their preferences. So you embrace those folks and you're able to work together with them on a regular basis, no matter what your backgrounds are. And that goes along with the whole cooperation scheme. So that's an interesting part. And we also like to try and make sure people try and think differently and try to innovate and look at new ways of doing things so that we can improve our efficiency and our effectiveness.
So, my name is Divya Bovic, and I was wondering, what would you say is the most important scientific discovery made so far from the experiments conducted on the ISS?
I'm sure that is a matter of opinion, and I don't think I'm going to even begin to try to tackle that one. Kelly, I don't know if you want to.
Well, I'll just say that there is research going on in so many different areas, from biology to human physiology in our bodies to how materials can be formed in microgravity, to even looking at the cosmos, because we've got an amazing instrument on board the space station called the Alpha Magnetic Spectrometer that is looking for that dark matter that all the physicists have theorized is out there. We know that there's matter and there's antimatter, but there's a whole bunch of stuff in the universe that we don't know exactly what it is, and we theorize that it's this thing called dark matter. And we're looking forward, hopefully this year, to getting some results from that experiment. It's been collecting billions of particles for the last year since it was launched on the NextLast shuttle mission. And so that could actually change our understanding of the universe. And that's the kind of things that really make the differences that change your textbooks for students that are coming down the road from you. But a lot of the things we're working on have everyday applications. I had a guy in here yesterday who's an experimenter working on these things called chondrites or dendrites. And when you make metals on the Earth, you have all these little crystals that forms as part of the alloy process, where you mix two metals together to make a stronger metal. Kind of things are used in engines and things like that. And they're looking at those on the International Space Station. Here's an example from the coarsening of solid and liquid mixtures experiment that shows you that on the ground, all of the particles that are solids and the crystals tend to float up to the top, but in the microgravity environment and space station, they're dispersed uniformly throughout the sample. And the idea there is we can make stronger, better metals and other materials that will help us here on the ground. And so that's a really important discovery. Another one is the discovery that we can monitor our planet from the Earth with photography and other kinds of instruments. And those are helping us learn more about how humans affect the environment and how it's changing, letting us look at changes in the world's environment. And we've also got Tom Marshburn working on an experiment you can see right here on some live TV from the space station. And he's working on a thing called the Marangoni experiment that looks at how fluids react to microgravity. And those will help us build better engines on the ground and things. So all those discoveries will add up to improvements in our everyday lives. And I don't know that anybody can come up, as Christy said, with what the most important one is yet. I think it's the cumulative growth in our scientific knowledge in all these different fields that is really going to help propel us into the next era of exploration and discovery. And we want you to be along for that, because you're going to be doing it.
All right, and Ann Richards School, we're just about at the end of our window, so we have time for one final quick question, and then we're going to wrap up.
Thank you. Coming. Hi, I'm Isabel Clay Phylum, and my teacher, Mr. M, had a question, but he's not here today, so I'm going to ask for him. So what are the goals for the Orion project since the constellation program will be ended?
I think you know that one, Christy.
I just heard the last part of the question. Can you repeat?
Goals for the Orion program.
Absolutely. Right. So, we've obviously got our ISS presence today, and we've got commercial entities that are working to give us a back and forth capability to ISS. So Orion, our main mission is to go beyond low Earth orbit. We want to explore further. We want to go back to the moon. We want to go possibly to an asteroid or to a Lagrange point. If you're not familiar with those, you'll have to look that up. But those are points out in space that are more stable. So a vehicle is going to stay there more easily with very little propellant, allowing it to stay there, with little mass. So there's a great advantage in going to a place like that as a stepping stone towards the moon or to Mars. And then ultimately, of course, our main destination we want to be getting to is to Mars. So all these other destinations that we could go to will be an opportunity for us to test out our technologies a little closer to home, and then venture out, looking in that maybe 2030-ish time frame for being on Mars with our crew. So a lot of exciting places to go, and so our Orion vehicle, the main portion that the crew is a capsule, and it's very similar in shape to Apollo capsule, although it's a bit bigger. We can hold 4 crew members in that, and of course they've got some of the comforts of home, having a hygiene area with potty and a galley for food preparation, but obviously simplified food preparation and things like that to keep mass down. They would have sleeping bags on there, and a typical mission on there would probably be about 2 weeks long. For missions where you need to go beyond that, where you're going to maybe stay at a Lagrange point for a while, you would mate with another vehicle and have extra living space to be in and extra supplies. We found out that it's very expensive to human rate a vehicle, and so you want that vehicle that the crew is in to be as simple as it can be to get its job of getting the crew to and from its destinations. And then the other living space or other payloads that you want to take up, we want to take those up on a unmanned mission, unmanned launch, just because we can get that to orbit much cheaper in a vehicle that's not human rated. So that's why you see not a super spacecraft with all the bells and whistles in that, but a combination of multiple spacecraft that come together to get the whole job done.
Well, one thing I don't think you did mention, Christy, is the other thing is people may think about the space shuttle and how cool it was and it came back. But the one thing the shuttle couldn't do is it couldn't go as far as Orion's being planned to go. And the main reason for that is because when you're coming back to Earth from distances that far away, you're coming back a lot faster. And it increases the heat that the spacecraft has to be able to survive. I think it's about 10 times the heating of a shuttle. And so you've got to make sure that the heat shield for that capsule and that the capsule shape itself is something that is better suited toward those high-speed reentries.
Right, and so the Orion spacecraft does enter with its heat shield and then deploys chutes to allow it to land soft enough that you wouldn't have injury to the crew on landing. And nominally, we land in the water, and you would have a ship right nearby to pluck that vehicle out up onto the ship, and then the crew would get out there. A lot of desirable aspects about the water landing, and that we have so many opportunities at different locations to land on the Earth that it gives you a chance to return to Earth almost any time.
All right, Kelly Humphreys from the Public Affairs Office and Christy Sowers, thank you so much for answering questions from Ann Richards School for Young Women Leaders. For the school itself, do you want to say goodbye or thank you?
Thank you so much. This has been Mr. M's 6th grade STEM class, and we were so excited to talk to you today. Thank you so much to everyone for your time.
We were glad to be there. Thanks a lot for having us.